I literally took one sip of my beverage and the whole side of my face felt like I had a stroke.
One person who was always anti-Diddy and was always speaking about Diddy as a problematic person was 50 Cent. And it turns out that it's just been announced that he's created a docu-series on Netflix. I can't wait to see this. The other end of that, every person who has tried to speak out about this, who has tried to speak out about the industry, the type of people that are controlling the industry, the attacks that people face from the media if they try to speak out, is always the same. They're called crazy. And an example of one such individual who went through those sorts of attacks is...
I got on a plane at 5:30 a.m. Go to this party. I think half the people there were butt naked.
Would you be open to a plea bargain?
Well, it's not up to me. It's up to Mr. Combs, and I don't see it happening.
Why?
Because he believes he's innocent. He believes he's innocent, and what's more, he believes that he needs to stand up, not just for himself, for his family, and for everybody who's been targeted by the federal government.
Well, Bill and Sade, accepting a plea agreement would mean that Sean Combs would have to admit to trafficking and force. And today he made it very clear that was not going to happen. Diddy maintained all along these encounters involved consenting adults and plans to take his chances that a jury agrees.
Isn't that, to my mind, that's one of the bigger hurdles in selecting a jury this coming week, is that there is, at least anecdotally, you know, when I talk to people, they have that opinion, strongly held opinion, that there's celebrity tapes, that they've kind of conflated Epstein, and you mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell and all of these things, into Diddy. There's this idea that somehow this is Epstein redux or something.
What made you come here to support Puff?
I'm supporting Puff because he's innocent, and I'm wholeheartedly believing his innocence, and I knew he's innocent. So
you say you know he's innocent?
1,000%.
Mr. Combs feels A, he's innocent, which is why he's not going to plead guilty. B, he's going to be truthful about this case because he wants to portray that to the people who have loved him his whole life. And I think he also feels an obligation to people in general. Maybe it's black people, maybe it's white people, maybe it's anybody who's ever felt aggrieved and targeted by the government. He feels an obligation to those people to say, you know what, maybe I can break the model. You know, maybe I can show the world that a black man can win, you know, in federal court. And I think he probably is the only person I know of who might be able to actually accomplish that.
She did, and when the judge did, Diddy, who was sitting at the defense table with his attorneys, did not show any signs of emotion. He took a sip of water before he was led out of the courtroom by the U.S. Marshals. Now, his lawyers have vowed to fight this. They are going to be back in court on Wednesday before the judge who will oversee this trial and try to get Diddy to be released.
Now, as far as jury selection goes, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that both sides expect to have all of this done in the matter of 3 days. Now, given just how high profile this trial is, I was kind of stunned that they seem very confident that they will be able to seat a jury in that amount of time.
What happens is if people go into a trial believing the firepower on the prosecution is so strong, I mean, let's say on a scale of 1 to 100, it's a 95 that it's so strong, but it goes down to an 88. That helps the defense because everybody goes in thinking, wow, they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and all of a sudden, none of it's there. I think that actually helps the defense.
The last hearing before Sean Combs' trial starts, when he walked into federal court today, he appeared to be looking for his family. They've pretty much been at all of the hearings that I've been to, but there was no presence of his sons or his mother or his sister who had previously been at those hearings.
Do you still think that, because there is this public perception, that there are celebrity tapes involved in this case?
No.
Do you still think that there are minors involved in this case?
I'm certain no.
Okay.
And again, when you say this case, we're talking the criminal case.
The criminal case.
In the
correct.
criminal,
I know that.
In the criminal case, in the criminal case,
right.
No.
Back up a little bit, please.
How can you support your father? How do you support him moving forward?
At trial, Combs will ditch the jail garb and wear ordinary clothes, as his lawyers argue the evidence shows consenting adults being intimate in their own way.
We have the latest from federal court in the Sean Combs criminal case. Status of jury selection, what Diddy's going to be wearing, violation of a gag order, rejecting a plea offer.
Diddy's lawyers had argued that he had made good faith efforts by showing up in New York, ready to surrender to face these charges. But prosecutors said that he could not be trusted, that he has a history of trying to intimidate witnesses, including some who are going to be witnesses in this case. They urged the judge to remand him.
He knows the deck is stacked against him. They've got a ton of evidence. Take the plea deal, dude. Just take it.
Well, my guess is that, because we don't know the deal of the plea deal. At least I don't think we do.
True.
Okay.
The decision guarantees Combs will face trial beginning just 4 days from now that will test whether one of music's most prolific figures used his power, wealth, and fame to exploit both women and men for decades.
Elaborate, sometimes days-long parties by coercing victims through drugs, threats, and manipulation. They claim to have video evidence, and some of the accusations echo details from over 70 civil lawsuits filed against Combs over the last 30 years.
Major developments tonight involving the case against Sean Diddy Combs, what he decided in court today, and what this now means, the move coming just 4 days before his trial is set to begin. Here's Aaron Katursky.
Tonight, Sean Combs makes it official. He's rejecting the government's offer to plead guilty and spare himself the possibility of a prolonged term in prison. When asked if he turned down the offer, Combs answered, "Yes, I do, Your Honor," as he stood in a baggy beige jail uniform. Terms were not disclosed, but prosecutors did say a plea could result in a shorter sentence for Combs than if he's convicted.
Federal trafficking, racketeering, and charges beginning Monday morning.
Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs back behind bars, a magistrate judge denying him bail, saying that there were no conditions that she could conceive of that would make her confident that he would appear again for other court appearances. The judge saying, "My concern is this is a crime that happens behind closed doors."
This is going to be such a massive trial, like maybe the biggest Hollywood trial. God knows which way it's going to go. Is it going to go on for weeks? And
for sure, weeks.
What happens when one of music's most powerful moguls faces allegations that could completely reshape the narrative around his life and career? Sean Diddy Combs, rapper, entrepreneur, and cultural icon, is at the center of a high-stakes trial that has captivated Hollywood and beyond. Federal charges of trafficking, racketeering, and exploitation have brought to light shocking claims. Elaborate, sometimes days-long parties allegedly involving coercion through drugs, threats, and psychological manipulation. Prosecutors assert they possess video evidence that ties these accusations back decades, painting a picture of a hidden world operating behind closed doors. These allegations aren't just about Diddy. They strike at the heart of how power, wealth, and fame can be wielded in ways that challenge public perception. As the courtroom drama unfolds, it's not just Diddy's legacy on trial, it's also the very concept of trust. Who do you believe when everyone involved has something to lose? In a case where reputations hang in the balance and the stakes couldn't be higher, the line between truth and fiction becomes increasingly blurred. Let's break this down further. Federal prosecutors are accusing Diddy of running an operation so secretive and calculated that it allegedly thrived behind closed doors for decades. According to the indictment, these weren't just casual gatherings. They were elaborate, sometimes days-long events where victims were allegedly coerced into participation through a combination of drugs, threats, and emotional manipulation. Prosecutors claim these activities were meticulously planned and executed under the guise of privacy, making them even harder to detect or expose. And here's the kicker. Some of these accusations eerily echo details from over 70 civil lawsuits filed against Diddy in the last 30 years. Despite the mounting evidence and intense scrutiny, Diddy has maintained his innocence throughout, firmly arguing that any encounters in question involved consenting adults who willingly participated. Now, with the trial set to begin in mere days, the stakes couldn't be higher. If convicted on charges of trafficking, racketeering, and exploitation, Diddy could face life-altering consequences, including the possibility of spending the rest of his life behind bars. But what's particularly striking is why he rejected a plea deal, an offer that could have potentially reduced his sentence. That decision alone speaks volumes about how confident, or perhaps defiant, he feels heading into this fight. Is it a bold move by someone who believes he's been wrongfully accused, or is it a gamble by a man convinced he can outmaneuver the system? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain. The world is watching. Enter Roger Bonds, Diddy's former bodyguard turned cooperating witness. For decades, Bonds walked half a pace behind the mogul, mastering discretion like no other. He organized arrival routes, tested barricades, and ensured nothing disrupted the empire. But that loyalty ended when Bonds handed over a thumb drive labeled Payroll Night. Prosecutors say it contains encrypted ledgers, shift rosters, and internal chat logs mapping activity across Diddy's properties, from Miami to Los Angeles. Among the files is a spreadsheet titled Guest Care Roster Master, detailing door cycles during period staff, referred to as aftercare resets. Bonds claims those entries align with camera blackouts, spikes in linen replacements, and bulk purchases of industrial disinfectants labeled Expedite. According to investigators, these patterns were consistent across multiple estates, always occurring during overnight hours and accompanied by staffing notes listing extra linen orders. Defense lawyers argue Bonds is trading loyalty for leniency, portraying him as a disgruntled employee who stockpiled proprietary files for leverage. They also cite prior depositions where Bonds praised Diddy as a conscientious employer. However, prosecutors counter that Bonds' cooperation agreement includes a cancellation clause should he provide materially false statements, effectively incentivizing truthfulness. If his testimony holds up, it could reshape the entire narrative, turning what was once dismissed as routine housekeeping into evidence of deliberate concealment. Industry insiders are already feeling the ripple effects of Bonds' cooperation. Private security firms that once prioritized absolute confidentiality are now revisiting their policies, promoting transparency audits and detailed record-keeping. Contracts for high-profile events now require dual sign-offs for off-camera housework and mandate documented justification for phone check stations. Regardless of the trial's outcome, Bonds' decision to cooperate has already begun to influence industry practices, signaling a broader shift toward accountability and traceable oversight. So, what exactly does the evidence reveal? According to Bonds, the spreadsheets show consistent patterns. Guest wing access was restricted to cleaning personnel during specific windows, followed by bulk purchases of industrial disinfectants labeled Expedite. On paper, these actions might appear to be routine housekeeping tasks, but when you dig deeper, there's far more to the story. Financial records further complicate the picture, highlighting cash withdrawals flagged as event enhancements. Prosecutors argue that these cash transactions fill gaps in corporate credit card statements, which otherwise seem incomplete or suspicious. Jurors heard IRS analysts explain how missing transactions aligned perfectly with manual deletions captured in card issuer logs. These deletions weren't random errors, but deliberate actions, according to prosecutors. Was this deliberate concealment? Or could it simply be dismissed as sloppy bookkeeping? The defense insists it's the latter, suggesting human error rather than malicious intent. But the timing raises significant questions. Why were supplies ordered the morning after shutdowns instead of before? Why do procurement invoices match the exact dates of camera blackouts and restricted access periods? As one prosecutor sharply noted, coincidence doesn't leave receipts. These discrepancies suggest a calculated effort to obscure certain activities, though the defense continues to push back, framing the evidence as circumstantial and open to interpretation. The stakes are high, as jurors must decide whether these patterns point to misconduct or mere operational inefficiency. Now, let's dive deeper into the financial side of things, because money, as they say, is the lifeblood of any empire. Bonds spreadsheets include columns labeled event cash, which ostensibly represent envelope disbursements for staff performing duties outside standard classifications. At first glance, this might sound harmless, just a way to compensate employees for extra work, right? But prosecutors aren't buying that explanation. They've linked these payouts to a much larger scheme involving inflated consulting fees funneled through intermediaries, eventually making their way into petty cash requests. Certified fraud examiners meticulously traced the flow of funds from corporate accounts to estate expense reports and uncovered a repeated pattern directly tied to door sensor shutdowns and linen replacements. Defense attorneys, of course, weren't about to let this slide without a fight. They challenged the methodology used by prosecutors, dismissing it as speculative and overly reliant on circumstantial connections. However, prosecutors fired back with a compelling counterargument. The consistency of the pattern is impossible to ignore. The same sequence unfolded across multiple properties, always during overnight hours when fewer people were around to notice, and always accompanied by camera downtime. This synchronization between financial transactions and operational anomalies raises serious questions. Could human error explain all of this? Sure, mistakes happen, but as the judge pointed out during proceedings, accidental keystrokes don't intentionally delete transaction numbers. Someone would have had to deliberately instruct the system to remove those records, which points to intent rather than oversight. The implications of this evidence are significant. If jurors accept the prosecution's argument, it could bolster their case by showing not just isolated incidents, but a deliberate effort to conceal activities through financial manipulation. And while defense attorneys continue to argue that these patterns can be explained away as routine or coincidental, the sheer repetition of the behavior makes that claim harder to swallow. After all, how many coincidences does it take before they start looking like something more intentional? As the trial progresses, the question remains, will jurors see these financial flows as proof of wrongdoing, or will they agree with the defense that the evidence is too speculative to draw firm conclusions? Either way, the stakes couldn't be higher for both sides. As Bonds took the stand, tensions within Diddy's inner circle came into even sharper focus. Defense attorneys worked tirelessly to paint Bonds as opportunistic, digging up past harassment complaints filed by junior staff against him, and suggesting that his cooperation with prosecutors stemmed from lingering resentment over being overlooked for promotions. They highlighted excerpts from prior depositions where Bonds had praised Diddy as a conscientious and fair employer, emphasizing his earlier loyalty. However, Bonds countered these claims by explaining that his perspective shifted dramatically after he began analyzing the internal data himself. He told the court that the spreadsheets and logs revealed patterns and practices that contradicted the image of transparency and fairness he had once believed in. Meanwhile, industry insiders watched the proceedings with rapt attention, particularly as private security firms scrambled to adapt to the implications of Bonds' revelations. For decades, the entertainment industry had relied on legacy playbooks that prioritized absolute discretion above all else, ensuring privacy for high-profile clients at any cost. But now, those same practices are being called into question. Clients are demanding transparency audits, detailed guest relations protocols, and documented oversight procedures to ensure accountability. Security firms are revising their policies to include dual sign-offs for sensitive tasks like off-camera housekeeping or linen replacements. These changes reflect an institutional shift toward traceable oversight, driven by fears of liability exposure and growing public scrutiny. It's clear that Bonds' decision to cooperate with investigators has already reshaped industry practices, long before the trial reaches its verdict. His testimony has not only influenced courtroom strategy, but also forced a broader reckoning within the private security sector about the balance between discretion and accountability. Public perception plays a monumental role in high-stakes cases like this one. Many have drawn parallels between Diddy and other infamous scandals. Think Epstein, Maxwell, and similar high-profile legal battles. While Diddy continues to maintain his innocence, skepticism lingers among the public. His supporters argue that he's standing up not just for himself, but as a symbol of resistance against what they see as government overreach. They believe he's fighting for anyone who has ever felt unjustly targeted by federal authorities. On the flip side, critics dismiss these claims, arguing that immense wealth and influence often shield the powerful from accountability. Regardless of where the truth lies, the ripple effects of this trial are undeniable and far-reaching. Insurers operating within the entertainment industry are now taking extra precautions. For instance, home studio gatherings, once considered routine, are now flagged for premium charges unless clients can provide transparent access control logs and third-party oversight measures. Venue contracts are also evolving, with new clauses specifying that any shift rotations involving off-camera housekeeping or private event management must include dual sign-offs, one from a supervisor and another from an independent steward. Global tour support firms, which traditionally focused on logistics and safety, are now advising clients to conduct independent audits of their private event protocols to ensure compliance with emerging standards. The trial has sparked a broader conversation about privacy and accountability in the entertainment sector. Industry insiders acknowledge that while discretion has long been a hallmark of high-profile gatherings, the days of unchecked opacity may be over. Clients are increasingly demanding audit-ready record-keeping systems and transparent staffing hierarchies. This institutional shift is not just about avoiding legal trouble. It's about rebuilding trust in an era where accountability is being prioritized over secrecy. Whether Diddy is ultimately found guilty or innocent, the changes set in motion by this case suggest that many contractual frameworks governing celebrity events will never return to their previous levels of secrecy. And it all began because one bodyguard decided to keep a backup drive and chose cooperation over silence. As the trial barrels toward its climax, one thing is certain. This case isn't just about Diddy. It's about power, privilege, and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. Will jurors see Bonds as a whistleblower reclaiming his conscience, or a disgruntled insider leveraging old files for personal gain? The answer to that question could redefine how we view accountability in the entertainment industry. Bonds' testimony has already sent shockwaves through Hollywood, forcing private security firms to rethink their practices. Absolute discretion, once a badge of honor, is now being replaced by demands for transparency and accountability. Clients are no longer satisfied with blind trust. They want documented proof that events are managed ethically and legally. The ripple effects of this trial extend far beyond the courtroom. Insurance companies are tightening their policies, requiring detailed logs of guest interactions and housekeeping activities during high-profile gatherings. Venue contracts now include clauses mandating dual sign-offs for any off-camera work, ensuring there's always a second set of eyes on sensitive operations. Even global tour support teams are advising artists to avoid closed-door retreats unless strict protocols are followed. It's clear that regardless of the verdict, the way business is conducted in the entertainment world will never be the same. But let's not forget the human element at play here. For Bonds, this isn't just about leniency, it's about legacy. If jurors believe his claims, he becomes a symbol of courage, someone who risked everything to expose systemic wrongdoing. On the other hand, if the defense successfully paints him as opportunistic, his cooperation could be dismissed as self-serving manipulation. Either way, the verdict will reverberate far beyond the courtroom. Whether justice prevails or the system protects the untouchable, the real question remains: what happens next? Because in Hollywood, the truth is rarely black and white. It's often obscured by layers of influence, ambition, and carefully guarded reputations. And when the dust settles, what will remain of Diddy's empire, and who else might rise to challenge the status quo?